Good evening and welcome to day one of the 11th Regulators and Policymakers Retreat being organized by the Independent Power Producers Association of India and Security Watch India here at the Taj Fort Aguada Beach Resort, Goa, India. With me, I have the honor of introducing to you Dr. Ajay Dua, who is the chairman of Areva T D in India. Welcome to the conference, Dr. Dua.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Dua, you have had a distinguished innings in the civil services, which is the elite cadre, the Indian Administrative Service and Civil Services here in India. And for our viewers who are not Indians and those indeed from the United States, etc., could you tell us briefly what are the civil services and how are they different from the United States civil services and how the country is really governed?
I don't think there are too many differences except at the senior levels. Middle and at the lower rung, the bureaucracy everywhere is the same pattern, assigned to a recruited by a ministry, by a department, and they spend all their life there.
Typical Weberian bureaucracy.
Yes, but in India, at the senior levels of bureaucracy, there is particularly the non-technical ministries, where the technological input is not so heavy. People move from one senior assignment to another, but they belong to a particular service in India, which is called the Indian Administrative Service. People there are generalists, but bring with them fair amount of field experience, because all of them start their work in the districts, sub-districts, then move up the geographical entities to the provincial level, and then come to Delhi. So to that extent, they might be generalists, but they do have with them considerable ground experience. They also have very often experience of policy making at the provincial level. And then ultimately they come to the federal government, where again they are there for a limited tenure, usually of 5 years, and then are required to go back to their provinces so that others can take their places. But I believe in the United States, once you are in a department, you stay in that. So you certainly do become a specialist, but you probably have a somewhat, if I might say, a narrower view of things than the Indian system, which gives you a slightly broader perspective.
Right. So this Whitehall model of bureaucracy that we have, typical Weberian bureaucracy, why is it sometimes accused of the fact that IS officers are looking at it from a very central or a very federal perspective, even though they have risen really from the state ranks? I mean,
you're very right. That's a relative issue, because in the Indian Administrative Service, over the years, in deference to the demands of the state governments, a certain percentage of jobs or certain percentage of posts in the civil service are in the Indian Administrative Service are filled up by promoting people from the state civil services. Roughly it is now about a third. A third of these people actually have done work at even lower levels than sub-collectors. They tend to be subject specialists also, and then they join the civil service, but most of them do not come to the federal level either because of age or because of inclination. They work within the states. So compared to such people, people say that people who are direct entrants to the IAS and who haven't come through so-called through the state civil services, they tend to be more federal oriented, whereas the people who've been promoted into the IAS probably are a little more state centric.
So, sir, this bureaucracy, so far, called the steel frame of democracy, the structure that supports democracy, we have seen, sir, that it has, to some extent or to a large extent, performed very well, given the fact that India has faced adversity, whether it was the Chinese war, the Pakistani wars, famines, droughts, and a whole lot of other issues throughout the years. Now, sir, the fact that the state is in retreat, the state as in the government is in retreat, and private sector, PPP and all those other partnerships are coming in, and we are inviting foreign investments, where do you think is the civil service system going to head? I mean, is it going to be different? Is it going to morph into something else? Or will it be pretty much the same?
I think in keeping up with the times and the nature of role the government is assuming upon itself, and there is also necessary to restructure the civil service even at the senior levels. First, there is increasing need for specialization even within general administration. Management of economic issues is far different than managing police or law and order or security. So at senior levels also now increasing specialization. It may not be ministry wise as the middle level or the junior people have it, but certainly sector wise. People be trained for economic management, people be trained for regulatory management, people be trained in disaster or crisis management, because these are some of the roles which the senior civil services in India have been performing. There should be a greater degree of professionalization within these groups, and then probably some of these jobs also only filled up through a competitive process. Let a civil servant also apply as also a manager of a private entity or somebody else who has a relevant experience, rather than these jobs now at the senior level being a right of only the civil servants. So there would be probably a more appropriate fitting of the people, and also the nature of the tenure of these assignments will be filled for a particular tenure. If the person does well, he is entitled to a renewal of his contract, but then let him again at that point of time also compete with others who are interested in displacing him.
So you're in favor of lateral entry?
I am certainly for managing jobs at senior level which are increasingly requiring people to have more domain knowledge, as also more technical inputs.
So do you see the Knowledge Commission and, for example, people from the private sector coming into private sector corporate like Mr. Arun Bera coming to the Planning Commission? Do you see this as symptomatic?
Yes, it's been happening for a while. Okay. We, in fact, in India, we had formed the Indian Management Service way back, almost parallel to the IAS. There used to be Mr. Mantosh Sondi, Secretary Steel, who had come from a steel plant, and before that he was the general manager of the Avadi Defence Tank Factory. Professor Mr. Basu, he in fact was the first entrant of the Indian Management Service. But later on they found there were not too many people willing to join it. As a result, the service never really took off. But having said that, I am completely in favor of lateral entry so that the country gets the best talent to run a particular department or run a particular entity, rather than it being the birthright of anyone, including the members of the senior civil service in India.